Emma Briggs stood outside her father's garage with her arms folded, eyeing the rust-eaten Mustang they had dragged home months ago. To anyone else it looked like scrap metal, but to her it was potential on 4 wheels. People in their small North Carolina town never expected much from a girl with grease under her nails. Her father, Ray, was the only one who saw her gift. He had raised her alone after her mother passed away, and that Mustang wasn't just a project. It was a chance to prove everyone wrong who ever laughed at their life and limitations. Ray bought the 1967 Mustang for $200 at a farm auction. The hood wouldn't open without a crowbar. The engine was a mess, and every inch screamed junk. But Emma didn't see junk. She saw challenge, legacy, and freedom. Night after night, she poured herself into the project, learning engine repair with her father, replacing gaskets, rewiring systems, rebuilding the carburetor. They didn't have fancy tools or brand-new parts, just resourcefulness and a shared dream. Emma never went to prom, skipped every high school party, and ignored jeers about her calloused hands. The Mustang came first, always. Her classmates mocked her every chance they got. When she walked through the hallways in worn-out boots and oil-streaked jeans, the rich kids snickered behind her back. "Guess she's still pretending to be a boy," one said. "She probably smells like gasoline," said another. Emma ignored them, pretending their words didn't matter, though sometimes they stung. She had memorized repair manuals instead of textbooks and preferred crankshafts over chemistry. Her father called her his gearhead princess, and though that title meant more than any crown, deep down she wished just once someone outside that garage saw what she could do. Ray wasn't just a mechanic, he was a mentor, a protector, and the only family Emma had left. When the bills piled up and the mortgage threatened their garage, he worked double shifts while still finding time to help her sand the chassis and test drive their rebuilt machine. Their bond was forged in sweat, late-night coffee, and the growl of a revving engine. Together they dismantled doubts bolt by bolt, transforming the Mustang into something that almost purred. Emma didn't just build a car, she built resilience. It was nearly race-ready, and the amateur competition was only weeks away. The track they aimed for was infamous, the Ridgefield Amateur Invitational, an annual race in Charlotte attracting souped-up imports, vintage muscle, and cocky high schoolers backed by their wealthy parents. The prize wasn't just money, it was recognition, credibility, and maybe a foot in the door to professional racing. Most competitors arrived with trailers, pit crews, and decals. Emma and Ray would show up in a beat-up pickup truck with a rebuilt Mustang and a toolbox held together with duct tape. She wasn't after fame. She wanted respect. And for that, she was willing to risk humiliation and the bitter sting of failure. When the day arrived, Emma could feel her heart pounding like pistons firing inside her chest. As they rolled the Mustang onto the track, laughter followed. One boy yelled, "Didn't know scrap metal could race." Another said, "Hope she brought a tow truck for when it dies on lap 2. The car had no fancy paint job, no sponsors, just raw power under its hood and an engine fine-tuned to perfection. Emma climbed in, buckled the belt, and kissed her mother's old racing patch sewn onto her sleeve. Her father gave her a nod from the sideline that said everything. She adjusted the rearview mirror, noticing the smirks of the other drivers. Their cars gleamed like showroom models, decals screaming money. But when the lights flashed green, Emma slammed the accelerator and the Mustang lunged forward like a beast finally unleashed. The crowd snickering turned to gasps as she took the lead within seconds. Her fingers danced across the gearshift, each turn and curve met with surgical precision. Every late night spent in the garage, every greasy hand and skinned knuckle, it all converged in that moment as she raced against those who thought she didn't belong. Lap after lap, she maintained her lead. One competitor tried to box her in on the turn, but Emma instinctively downshifted and slipped past him like vapor. The Mustang roared like it had something to prove, and she drove with everything she had: rage, hope, skill, and silence. The crowd, once jeering, now leaned forward in stunned silence. The announcers fumbled to pronounce her name. No one expected the poor mechanic's daughter to be dominating the race. Emma focused only on the road, the tires beneath her, and the voice in her head that always told her, "Keep going." On the final lap, the second-place driver, a favorite to win, attempted a dangerous overtake. He nudged her rear bumper, trying to throw her off balance, but Emma didn't flinch. She remembered what Ray taught her. If they push you, hold your line. She tapped the brake, causing him to overshoot, then slipped inside the curve and surged forward. The finish line came into view. She tightened her grip, eyes locked forward, heart steady. In that final moment, time slowed. The Mustang's engine screamed its final note, and then she crossed it, first, alone, victorious, to stunned silence, and then a roar. People didn't cheer immediately because they couldn't believe it. Then came the thunderous applause. Parents stood, phones went up, and fellow racers stared slack-jawed. Ray ran toward her with arms wide open, tears mixing with grease on his cheeks. "You did it," he said, pulling her close. "You really did it." Emma could hardly breathe. Not from exhaustion, but from something else. Relief. Validation. Everything they'd built in that garage hadn't just worked, it had won. Her hands shook as she stepped out, greeted not with insults but applause. It was no longer just a junkyard Mustang. It was legendary. Reporters approached, cameras flashing. "Who are you?" one shouted. "Where did you come from?" asked another. Emma just looked at her dad. "We came from the garage," she said. "That's where it started. That's where it ends." She didn't care about interviews or headlines. All she wanted was to sit in that Mustang, close her eyes, and remember the nights they wondered if the engine would ever start. The nights they thought no one would notice. The nights they built a car from pieces and a dream. The Mustang had carried more than a driver. It carried a story. They loaded the Mustang back onto the trailer and began the quiet ride home. Emma sat in the passenger seat, watching the road blur past. Ray kept glancing at her, the pride in his face barely contained. "You were born to do this," he said quietly. "I always knew it." Emma didn't speak for a while, then replied, "I think I just needed everyone else to know it too." Her phone buzzed with dozens of messages, some from local newspapers, some from people she didn't even know. But she ignored them all. This win wasn't for them. It was for them. That night, Emma sat alone in the garage with the Mustang. The moonlight poured in through the window, glinting off the patched hood. Her mother's old jacket hung beside the doorway. She rested her hand on the car, remembering how far it had come, and how far she had too. The laughter, the whispers, the mockery, it was fuel. She knew there'd be more ahead, on bigger tracks with sharper competition, but that didn't scare her anymore. She had earned her place not by chance, but by dedication. She had rebuilt not just a car, but the entire way people saw her. Emma finally opened her messages. One stood out. A regional racing scout wanted to talk. He'd seen the race and said she had raw talent, something they couldn't teach. He offered her a chance to test drive on a professional track. Emma stared at the message, blinking. It felt surreal. For years they struggled just to keep the lights on in the garage. Now she was being noticed. She looked at the Mustang again. "We're not done," she whispered. "We're just getting started." The engine cooled in silence, but something deeper inside her had just begun to burn, hot and steady. She walked into the house, where Ray was dozing off on the recliner. In her hand was the phone, with the offer still glowing on the screen. She gently nudged his shoulder. "Dad," she said softly, "they want me to test for the pros." He blinked awake, confused, then sat up fast. "They saw the race?" She nodded. "And they want you?" She nodded again. Ray stood in stunned silence for a moment before smiling. "Then we better start tuning that engine." Emma laughed for the first time in days. The garage wasn't just where they fixed cars, it's where dreams ignited. They spent the next few days adjusting the Mustang, refining little things: tire pressure, timing, weight distribution. Emma practiced on back roads and empty lots. She trained herself to listen to every sound the car made. When they got the official invite to the Atlanta track, they didn't celebrate. They got to work. Ray knew the real race was just beginning. Emma wasn't scared. She was ready. She no longer needed to prove herself to the kids at school or the racers who mocked her. She'd earned their silence, and now she would race not just for respect, but for her future. Atlanta was a different world. The professional track shimmered with polished steel and television cameras. Emma stood beside her Mustang, trying to steady her breath. Around her, racers stretched in uniforms branded with million-dollar sponsors. Their cars looked like spaceships compared to her rebuilt relic. Ray placed a hand on her shoulder. "They may have money, but they don't have what you have." She gave him a tight nod. This wasn't just a race. It was a stage. One wrong move, and she'd be a punchline again. But one right move, and everything she and Ray built could change their lives forever. The Mustang growled as she drove it to her designated start slot. Spectators filled the grandstands, waiting to watch the newcomers crash or crack under pressure. She glanced left and right. Sleek imports, precision muscle, digital dashboards. Emma's hands tightened on the wheel. She didn't need tech. She had touch. She could feel when a bolt was too tight, when a gear was too slow. The green flag waved. Engines screamed to life, tires shrieked against asphalt, and her Mustang leapt forward like a creature finally returned to its natural habitat. In a heartbeat, Emma was shoulder to shoulder with the elite. The first few laps were chaos. One car fishtailed, another nearly clipped her bumper on the inside curve. Emma held her line. She didn't panic. Every lesson Ray had taught her, every mistake they had corrected together, guided her through each hairpin turn. The Mustang was heavier than most of the other cars, but she used it to her advantage, leaning into corners with momentum they couldn't match. Drivers tried to intimidate her with close calls, but she had nerves of steel. While others calculated risk, Emma relied on instinct, built over years of grinding through every possible mechanical failure. By the sixth lap, she was mid-pack. Not bad for a girl no one expected to finish, but not bad had never been good enough for Emma. She began picking off racers one by one. She drafted behind them, waited for hesitation, and struck when they overcorrected. Her timing was perfect. Fans started murmuring. Broadcasters started noticing. "That's the Briggs girl," one of them said. "From the Junkyard Mustang story." Cameras zoomed in on her car. They couldn't believe the machine slicing through elite racers wasn't factory-tuned. It was backyard built by a mechanic and his daughter with stubborn hands. A light drizzle began falling, slicking the asphalt. Panic rippled through the pack. High-speed spins and hydroplaning became real threats. Emma didn't flinch. She'd grown up practicing on wet back roads with bald tires and no anti-lock brakes. This was familiar. Her Mustang stuck to the track like it had been born in the rain. As others skidded, she surged ahead. She climbed to fourth, then third. Her tires hissed against the soaked pavement, windshield wipers thumping in rhythm. It wasn't just skill, it was survival instinct. The same instinct that had kept her going through every sneer, every doubt, every struggle. The lead car was a sponsor-backed machine driven by a racer named Zane Mercer, son of a former NASCAR champion. Everyone expected him to win. Emma eyed him through the mist as she approached. He noticed. He tried to block her. She braked late, ducked inside the curve, and nearly scraped the rail as she passed. The crowd exploded. Mercer fought back, accelerating on the straightaway. The two cars battled neck and neck, swapping leads through rain-slick turns and hairpin corners. Emma didn't fear him. She had no legacy to protect, nothing to lose. She raced like she belonged, because she did. On the final lap, she found herself inches behind Mercer. They rocketed down the back straight, engines howling, tires spitting water. Ray watched from the pit, clutching a wrench so tightly his knuckles turned white. Emma downshifted early, braking later than anyone dared. She took the inside on the final curve, nearly grazing the wall. Mercer tried to cut her off, but oversteered. His tires slipped. Emma straightened out, punched the throttle, and surged ahead. The Mustang crossed the finish line half a second before Mercer's car. The stadium erupted. The girl with the salvaged Mustang had just won a pro circuit race. Reporters flooded the track before Emma even unbuckled her helmet. Microphones and flashes surrounded her as Ray jogged up, tears mixing with rain on his face. "You did it again," he said, laughing breathlessly. Emma looked stunned. "We did it," she replied. The media asked about her training, her sponsors, her plans. Emma just smiled. No sponsors, just one garage, one dad, one dream. It became the quote of the day. Within an hour, her name was trending nationwide. Offers poured in. Racing teams, car brands, apparel companies, all wanted a piece of her. But Emma wasn't in a hurry. Instead of signing contracts, she flew back home with Ray. The Mustang, scarred and glorious, was loaded onto the same old trailer they had always used. Back in their garage, she sat on the floor with a wrench, touching up a bolt like it was just another afternoon. She wasn't chasing stardom. She was protecting something sacred, the way they built that car, the nights spent fixing things they didn't understand, the quiet belief that they were meant for something bigger. While others built empires from luxury, Emma and Ray had built theirs from struggle, and it held strong. In the weeks that followed, Emma turned down several high-paying endorsements. Instead, she used her winnings to renovate the garage and turn part of it into a training center for underprivileged teens interested in racing. She called it The Pit. Girls from trailer parks and boys from foster homes lined up for a shot. She taught them engine basics, race theory, and most importantly, resilience. She'd always said being underestimated was fuel. Now she poured that fuel into the next generation, giving them what she never had, a place to belong, a chance to believe, a way to rise. Ray watched with pride as their once-forgotten garage became a local landmark. Visitors traveled across states just to see the infamous Mustang that changed racing headlines. One day, a Hollywood producer called, offering to make a movie about Emma's journey. She laughed and said, "Not unless the first scene is Dad welding at midnight." Magazines called her a symbol of grit. Young racers called her their role model. Despite the spotlight, Emma remained grounded. She spent every morning tuning engines and every evening eating chili with Ray at the same kitchen table they'd always shared. Nothing had really changed. One afternoon, Mercer arrived at the garage. He stepped out of a shiny SUV and offered his hand. "You smoked me," he said, grinning. "Respect." Emma shook it. "You're not so bad yourself." He glanced at the Mustang. "That thing shouldn't be legal," he joked. Emma replied, "It shouldn't be alive, but here we are." They talked shop for hours. Turns out, Mercer wasn't the arrogant racer people assumed. He invited her to a charity race in Chicago. Emma agreed, not because she needed another trophy, but because she wanted to show her students that passion could take them anywhere. In Chicago, Emma raced in front of a crowd of 50,000 people. Her students watched the live stream from the garage, cheering every lap. She didn't win that race. Mercer beat her by a whisker, but she smiled wider than ever. After the race, he handed her a card. "Join our team," it read. "We'll build something new, together." Emma paused. She thought of Ray, the pit, the girls learning to drive manual for the first time. She shook her head politely. "Thanks, but I've already built what I need." Mercer nodded. "You're not just a racer, you're a movement." She smiled. Emma's story appeared in a national ad campaign not long after. A video showed her working in the garage, rain pouring outside, her hands covered in oil. A narrator said, "Sometimes greatness comes with calluses." It went viral again. Car companies tried copying her look, her attitude. But they couldn't copy her spirit, because what made Emma great wasn't the Mustang or the track, it was the struggle, the nights of uncertainty, and the choice to keep going. In an industry obsessed with image, she was authenticity on wheels, and that's what made her unforgettable, both on and off the track. Years later, Emma became the youngest team owner in the American Racing Federation. She hired underdog drivers and gave chances to overlooked mechanics. Her pit crew included girls who once doubted their worth, and boys who never had fathers. The Mustang stayed in the shop, enshrined like a legend. When people asked why she kept it, she always said, "It's not a car, it's a promise. That where you start doesn't define how far you'll go." Young racers touched its hood for luck before every race. Some cried, some smiled, all left knowing that the impossible was just a challenge waiting. Ray retired, though he still showed up every Saturday to supervise. Emma let him. Their bond hadn't changed. It had only deepened. On Emma's 30th birthday, he handed her a box. Inside was a key and a note. It's time to build another one. From scratch. She opened the garage doors and found an old Dodge Charger shell parked outside. She laughed, hugged him tight and said, "Let's do it." The next chapter began not with cameras or applause, but with two people, a dusty shell, and an unshakable belief in building something no one else could imagine working again. Emma's students grew up to race, to engineer, to lead. One opened her own shop. Another became the first girl to win a national karting championship. They all credited Coach Briggs. At her induction into the Motorsports Hall of Fame, Emma wore her mother's jacket. The announcer said she changed racing by proving heartbeat's horsepower. She stepped onto the stage, looked out at thousands of faces, and simply said, "I just wanted one chance. I got it. Now I'm giving it back." The crowd stood in ovation, and somewhere in the back, Ray wiped his eyes again. She could have taken the money, she could have chased the trophies, but Emma Briggs chose to build a legacy. She didn't ask for attention. It followed her because the truth always shines through. She built faster cars, trained better drivers, and never stopped believing that talent hides in the unlikeliest places. And no matter how far she traveled, she always returned to the same garage in Charlotte, where it all began, where a junkyard Mustang became a legend, and where a poor mechanic's daughter rewrote racing history with nothing but grit, grace, and the roar of something real.